Hey, welcome in. I'm Rita, and this is the story I'm telling myself. If you've ever felt like you're standing in your own way, you are not alone. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Story I'm Telling Myself podcast. I'm so happy to have you with us today and introduce you to Dr. Tasha Golden, who is really going to blow your mind. I can't say this enough. Having seen her speak live in person, I immediately went after her. She can tell this story some other time, but I immediately went tracked her down and I was like, hey, I have a podcast and you need to be on it. So if you are here with us live during this recording, come hop in the comments and say hello and welcome Dr. Tasha Golden to the podcast, please. And thank you. And introduce yourself to everyone else that is here because we love having you in the comments. We love to answer your questions. We love to amplify your insights that you are sharing along the way as we are in this conversation. So come make yourself known. And while they are doing that, Tasha, it's your turn. Please tell everybody who you are.
Okay. I will try to encapsulate it. I'm Dr. Tasha Golden, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Rita. I started out as a singer-songwriter in the music industry and am glad to now be working in the sciences, combining arts and science to help people understand how the science of creativity and the practice of creativity can help us re-see the world, re-see our lives, re-see our work and leadership and things like that, to be able to have a different vision for the future and be able to take unique actions sometimes to get there. So that is the work that I do now, working with clients around the world, people from Google to South by Southwest to Mayo Clinic and all kinds of wonderful arts organizations and artists around the world. So this is the idea of the stories that we're telling ourselves is something very dear to my heart and to my research. So I'm glad to be here with y'all.
Yes. And it immediately zero it in for me, TashaGolden.com. And there's a special webpage for you, /TSITM, the story I'm telling myself. And we have that linked for you in the show notes as well. That is where you want to go to get all of Dr. Golden's details. You want to follow her on social media. She does a lot of article writing, really terrific, interesting articles and stuff that if you are as fascinated by what you hear today as I am, you are going to want to continue to read the thought leadership that she is bringing in this space of really this intersection of our humanness and the creative side of ourselves and what that means in our leadership, in our business, and our communities and the people around us. And I'm telling you, there are a few people that I fangirl over, and she's one of my new fangirl people because I really love the thought leadership that you bring, Dr. Golden. Thank you so much for saying yes to coming to the show. And we're going to talk about this transition that happened in your life. Hey, Coach Carrie, so happy to have you with us. Glad that you are here. So you were living what for you at the time and for so many people would be their life's dream. You were the artist making art out into the world that was being received in public, appreciated, and loved. So walk us into the story. Tell us about your early years and then how all of that shifted for you.
Yeah, from the time I was a really little girl, my dream for my life was to write songs and travel the world and perform them for people. And I'm so glad that I got to do that for a lot of years, toured full time with my partner and sometimes with a band, playing music all over the world, had songs in TV and film, got to work with some really amazing musicians. And it was such a fulfilling thing. And yes, continued to be a dream of mine. Like even as the years went on, I was like, oh, you set your eyes on like, oh, maybe we could do this. Maybe the music could go here. Maybe this could help people in this new way. Right. It was definitely the only passion that I knew. This is what I wanted to do with my life. I thought I'd do it until I died. But a couple of things happened during my career that wound up changing the trajectory of the career and then also of my life. And the first one is that I had songs that were about difficult things like my own history of depression or my family's history of domestic violence. And everywhere we went in the world, from Nashville to Beijing, those were the songs that people stayed after concerts wanting to talk with me about. And people would share their own really personal stories of similar things, abuse histories, mental illness, suicide ideation. And many of those people followed up their story by saying that I'm the first person they had ever told. And that obviously was such an honor to me, but it also made me very curious of like, oh, if I'm the first person, that means they haven't told a doctor before or a therapist. They haven't told a spouse or a close friend. And I got really curious about what is it about music or about a music venue or about a singer or a song that is making these things speakable for the first time for people. And, that was working that way for me too. Like there were things that I shared with rooms full of hundreds of people before I'd ever had a conversation about them with a friend, right? Because I could write a song about them, I could sing a song about it, but I couldn't just talk about it. So I got curious about that and tucked that away. The other big thing that happened is that I crashed into catastrophic burnout and major depression. And, I was in an industry that is known for chewing artists up and spitting them out. And I have in common, I now know that, people in the music industry have higher rates of mental illness than average, than the general public. But at the time, I just thought that I was alone and uniquely incapable of surviving the thing that was my dream, And I was in bed, wound up. I was in bed for weeks. I couldn't play shows for sure. And I knew then that I wasn't going to be able to tour again like I had. And I realized during that time, okay, this is the dream for my life. This is what I thought that I would be doing forever. This is the only thing I've ever wanted to do. If I can't do this, I don't know if I want to be here for real. And I was like, oh, as creative as I have been, I've always thought of it as a really creative person. As creative as I've been as an artist, as a singer-songwriter, as a performer, I have never learned to be creative about my own life. Like when it came to who I am, I had one story that I knew how to tell about who I was and what I was doing on the planet. And that story was I'm a singer-songwriter and a music career is my path to fulfillment. And the truth is that when I lost that story, I thought that I had lost my life. I didn't know who I was, or again, if I wanted a future here. And I'm gonna
pause you right there. I want to pause you right there because that is so powerful and also I think very, very relatable. And so let's just pause, listeners. Meryl, welcome. I'm so happy to have you with us. And let's just think about this a minute. What is our one story? Are we holding on to a one story? So you have this, you have this story when you hit your point of burnout and you found yourself lying in bed, Tasha. What was the unreliable narrator inside of your head telling you? We all have that inner critic that just sort of goes at us. And it's where the real struggle and resistance often happens for us when our bodies tell us something that our minds refuse to accept. So can you tell us a little bit about what that internal mental war was that you were experiencing at that time?
Well, I think in a way at that time, the mental war was sort of over. I had lost it.
So you were laying in bed going like, okay, tomorrow you're just going to figure this out. You're going to get up, you're going to do like you really knew you had already gotten past that point.
Yeah. It was sort of like the war was happening before that, although mostly unconsciously. Like my conception of being a musician and an artist was that this story that I had for my life was very expansive, like compared to the average person or the average career that I could have chosen in high school or something like that. I felt like I was doing something incredibly big and vast and adventurous. And of course, I could make the argument all day long that it indeed was, but it still was one kind of career path. One way that I could imagine, this fits who I am. This is my ambition. This is my dream. This is how I show up in the world. This is what it means to do something with my talent and my skill that matters to me. It was still incredibly narrow, actually. And I think that the mental battle was going on before that point, but again, with me not being aware, because I wasn't able to ask myself questions like, can I keep going? When I was feeling exhausted, when I was feeling like I didn't know how to get from one milestone to the next one. And I was like, maybe this isn't, our lives were very disconnected from our community. Financially, life was incredibly unpredictable, and that was really hard. I didn't know that I was neurodivergent at the time, but the kind of neurotype that I have doesn't do well in unpredictability. I had no idea. It's kind of like, at this point, it's like, oh, no wonder. But yeah, I think that the battle was going on between my body and my mind long before that. And eventually my body just had to shut everything down. And by the time I was lying in bed, it was such an obvious crisis that, yeah, I knew then that, okay, I have to either I'm not going to be here, or I have to figure out a completely different way to exist. And the story, the only kind of shining light at that moment when I look back on it is that I feel like I knew from the very beginning, oh, this story has just collapsed. But I had an understanding of it as being a story, which is weird. I don't know why I had that immediate, maybe it's just from being a writer or something like that. But I had this sense innately that oh, either I'm going to tell a different story, or this is going to end. My life is going to end, right? And so I did immediately understand that I had been telling a single story that didn't give me another one. It didn't make me want another one, for sure. There was a ton of grief and just severe collapse at that moment. But I did understand that I was experiencing the end of a story I'd been telling.
Yeah, can we talk about that grief and that ending? Because I think that is, I remember when I left my corporate career, and I stepped away from that, and I wasn't sure what was next for me. I thought I might go back at some point, but I really had no idea. And I remember grieving that. I remember being in tears, because that was my story. That was my story of what got me through high school, what got me through college, was becoming this corporate woman. I was achieving all of my goals of advancement and doing things that I wanted to do, until it just was not right for me and my family anymore. And I hit the pause button, but I did grieve that. And I think that is such a common experience, that when we hit these moments of transition, when it is time to release a story and we feel so untethered, I think grief is often in that space. So can you talk to us a little bit more about what that grief was like for you?
Yeah, I think that at the time I wouldn't have, maybe I would have. I don't know. Maybe I can give my previous self more credit. I was going to say I wouldn't have identified it as grief, but I think actually I could have at the time. I think it was because it was so obvious that something was over. Whereas some people, when they're in transition, they feel a little bit more power. They're kind of deciding whether to make a step or not. And so maybe when I think with the clients that I work with now that are in that kind of transition period, they feel a ton of turmoil. And sometimes it's kind of like doing the work of guiding them to realize that some of the turmoil that you're feeling is grief for what you know that you're going to give up if you step into this new thing, because you cannot have both. And so you either step into the new thing and you grieve the old, or you keep the old thing and you grieve what you're not going to try. But either way, there's grief, right? And a big part of my work now is to help people realize that none of us has to wait for a crisis that annihilates our current story before we're allowed to wonder if we could be telling a different one. And that's not even to say a better one. I don't think that the story I'm telling now is necessarily objectively better than the one I was telling before. It's just that my life and my brain and my health required me to tell different stories. And we're all capable of shifting the stories that we're telling. But yes, the pain of saying oh, I thought that I understood myself. I thought I understood who I was and what I was doing in the world. And now I have absolutely no idea. And that is painful. It's scary. It's also deeply sad to give up a kind of a source of identity, a source of pride, a source of kind of self-esteem, and understanding what your meaning is in your life, how you have meaning toward other people. Oh, this is the role that I play in their life. I feel good about that. I want to play that role. I can't play that role anymore. Okay, what role do I have? That is so painful and so scary. It's just also deeply sad. And being able to give yourself space. I had my body force me to give myself space for that for that grief. And it was kind of like combined with the level of exhaustion and burnout that I was in. And you know, I was being treated for depression. So we were talking about grief. So yes, I encourage anybody who's listening, if you're in transition, even if it feels like a very positive chosen transition, to recognize that, okay, but you are stepping away from something that probably did have its benefits. And you're allowed to look at that and be like, okay, even though I'm actively choosing to move towards something else, I am allowed to also be sad, or even if it's not necessarily sadness, but kind of take a moment to honor the path that you're leaving as well.
And it's a beautiful thing about our humanness that we often don't understand. Our ability to hold those two seemingly conflictual things inside of ourselves simultaneously. That
Yeah.
we can be both excited and grieving. We could be moving forward and feel loss. That those things can coexist together, and it is normal, and it is natural, and it is healthy when we can acknowledge those things. You said two really important things that stuck out to me as you were talking, Tasha, that I just want to highlight for our listeners. One is that you talked about the ego. So when you have this one story, you have a lot of ego that is tied up in that story. And for you, you know, you had people coming to you and telling you about the impact that you were having in their lives. And so that was the second part of, it wasn't just the ego, but it was the meaning that it created for you, and the meaning that it created for others. And we have to honor our ego. It is so core to our humanness. But this idea of meaning, that's the red thread, right? that brings fulfillment and happiness into our lives. That this is this idea of meaning. So you found yourself in this very deep hole. You were even questioning your ability to continue, you know, ideation of suicide, of ending life. Tell us a little bit about how you began to emerge and start to allow yourself to think about the shift in that story.
Well, yeah, thinking back now from my perspective, you know, I research, you know, behavioral science and mental health and public mental health and systems and things like that. I'm able to look back and see like, oh, there was a needed reconstruction of, you know, self-development, personal development, like ideas of like who we are and things like that. So, you know, we could nerd out about those kinds of specifics all day. But as far as like the felt experience at the time, I was just immediately trying to find like, okay, what are the things that is there anything left here that I love? You know, I remember Googling.
Oh, I love that question. I love that question. Is there anything left here that I love? What emerged from that?
Anybody who's listening that has experienced depression and especially severe depression knows that like the main symptom is not sadness. It's kind of numbness and just disinterest, really. Like there's nothing here for me. It's hard to like, it's kind of like, oh, if I don't have that, or even like my sense of it wasn't so much like, oh, I can't do that career anymore. It was like my body was I was just so exhausted. I couldn't even imagine doing it. At the time, I wouldn't have wanted to do it because it would have felt really painful to even try to do it, right? So it was kind of like, I miss that. I wish I could do it, but I don't long for it. What do I long for? You know, is there anything here? I remember Googling, can I be paid to read poetry, or somebody pay me to read poetry? Because the only thing that I was even remotely interested at the time was Mary Oliver. Like I would read Mary Oliver's poems and feel something. I felt something. I felt some kind of kinship or resonance. And I was interested in that. Like, okay, what is that? When I did that Google, Rita, what came up were degrees in creative writing. Like, oh, you can come get a master's degree in creative writing and kind of get like your tuition remission and be paid, you know, as part of that. And I remember talking to a mentor of mine back then, and he was like, oh, you know, I'll go ahead and apply for that because you might really appreciate the predictability, the structure of academia, which is so different from where you've been in the music industry. And I confess that just a few weeks into my collapse, I was putting together a little application for a master's degree in creative writing, I absolutely did not think that I would get in, because I was sending them like CDs and song lyrics, and they were asking for poems or like, creative nonfiction. I didn't have really things like that. But I was like, okay, whatever. And I only applied to 2 places. It was like the places that were within like a half-hour drive of me, because I wasn't going to move my life for something I didn't even know. I don't even know if I want to do this. This is totally a whim. I'm just kind of like following something. And as it turns out, I was admitted. They were like, yeah, this is really interesting. Come here and explore your writing. And that was such a gift. I mean, from the time I was admitted to the time the degree actually started was several months, and I was in intensive therapy that during that time. I was starting an antidepressant during that time, which I think really saved my life. And but that process, it was a kind of structured process of revisiting writing. I'd always been a singer-songwriter. I loved to write. I did write some poems here and there, but revisiting writing from a completely different vantage. It wasn't for an audience. It wasn't for something that I could ever imagine doing for an audience, although I wound up doing that several years later. But like, it was just writing to explore the craft, to explore the topics that were coming up. And it was a beautiful excavation of a lot of the things that had felt like they were up in the air and unconscious for me were able to come out in the poetry during that time, which kind of fed my interest in, there's something going on, with music that allows people to delve into things that they're not speaking about before. With any of these creative arts, there's something that allows us to, it changes the talk about ability. It changes the what we're able to know and think and disclose and connect over. And I continue to be interested in that, which is a different story, but how I wound up eventually with a PhD in public health, specializing in these impacts of arts and creativity on our well-being.
Well, the thread flows though, right? I mean, you found a path forward where you continued to create. Yeah. Right. In sort of a different media, but a related media, because it's still creating to communicate, to elicit some kind of response in yourself and in other people. And in the comments, Leanne has said the numbness that you were talking about, that people don't understand. Right. And it makes sense. You're feeling so numb, and what you ask yourself, what's still here that I care about? And it was feeling and was connecting to feelings were part of that. And if you've never suffered clinical depression, which I have not, but I have a family member who has, it is a very different beast and animal to try to navigate in that way. So I think it's so beautiful that that you found this path forward at such a difficult time, where you were able to just lean in to what still felt like, I would have to think, sort of a safe space, because it was creative. And so you started the creative writing. But how did that merge into public health and the kind of work that you are doing now?
Well, it was a long and winding road. There's not yet really a singer-songwriter to public health researcher pipeline, although I think we're starting to see more of it. But I was interested in. So you
started. Let's do it this way. You started with this creative writing. In terms of your internal story, what kind of permission did that start to give you that you needed at that moment?
Well, I had a couple topics that I kept circling around. I was writing a lot about like my loss of faith, which had been years before. I thought it was like that was a done story. Clearly, it wasn't. And I was writing a lot about, where we get meaning and what it comes from, and trying to also, I was writing a lot about what I called at the time social heresies. Like, what are the things that we are not supposed to say, we're not allowed to know? Bessel van der Kolk, I remember reading The Body Keeps the Score back then. And he had said that, like, in order to heal from trauma, we have to be allowed and be able and be safe to know what we know and feel what we feel. And that's a lot of what I was exploring. Like, when I read that, it was kind of like he was naming what I was trying to do in my writing, what I was exploring in some of my early research around, like, how do the arts help us kind of get honest about the things that we're really not supposed to let ourselves know. We're not supposed to know about the world, or, the things that we believe and don't believe. and having the space and the kind of like structured area to explore that. I remember talking with one of my professors and kind of apologizing that all of my stuff was about the same thing, and he was like, "Oh no." He was like, "Follow the obsession, because at some point you get to the end of it or you don't, and it's a path that you can follow for the rest of your life." And that was such a great. I think about his encouragement then kind of all the time. I should send him a note and let him know, because it was really important to hear that, like, no, follow the obsession. And that was like a year after he said that, about a year after I had, stopped touring. And I was getting a similar sense of permission from my counselor when I was first seeing somebody around, like, let's try to help you find something that you like, some kind of interest. What's something? I remember bartering with somebody that was local to me, because I wanted to try riding a horse. I had never done it. And it was just one of those little things like, oh, I remember being interested in that. Let me go pet a horse and try to learn how to ride it. And I was really bad at it, by the way. But we were just trying to make some permission to, like, what's some tiny little thing that you kind of feel like you're sort of interested in, and can we just go explore that? And having people around you that can remind you to do that. You don't necessarily have to know how to help you exactly do that, but to remind you to take that time and permission. And we now, like, now I'm aware of a lot of these studies that I've helped to conduct in some cases around how having a sense of permission is a lot of what the barrier is for people sometimes, and doing the things that can be so good for our well-being, and especially for our thriving. We're used to thinking about the concept of discipline with health, like, oh, I have to be disciplined and, go work out, or like not eat the things that are going to be bad for me or whatever. But there's also a sense of permission as far as doing the things that actually nurture you, that actually nurture that sense of wanting to be here. The World Health Organization defined health back in the 1940s as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So health has two parts. It's the absence of things that we don't want, and it is the presence of well-being. And they said complete well-being, right? Physical, social, mental. And so in my work now, I ask people all over the world, like, okay, then what the heck is well-being? If it's not just the absence of suffering, what is this thing that we are looking for? And would love any of your listeners to, like, contribute, like, what is it? How is it that you would define well-being? But the answers, tell us a lot about how we can think about health in general for our society, but also for ourselves. And some of those things around, like, meaning, purpose, belonging, connection, a sense of beauty, a sense of being part of things that are greater than yourself and that matter to you, having a sense of agency and influence over things, values that you have, things that matter to you in the world. These are some of the ways that people define well-being. And sometimes, in order to invest our time and energy in those, we, one, need systems and structures and supports that allow us time and space and access to do those things. And two, sometimes we need permission from the people around us and from ourselves to that these things actually matter. Go ahead and take the time.
One of the things that struck me as I was reflecting as you were talking about that is the word that popped into my mind when you were talking about health and, making sure that you're getting the right exercise and eating the right things, is the word compliance. It's like there's this place that we live in, right? And where we're on this continuum, and on one end of the continuum is compliance, and on the other end of the continuum is freedom. And when we start to drift to this place where we're over fixated on complying, are we complying with the things that are going to make our life? For me, it takes some of the joy. Like, I associate more joy with the freedom end of that continuum than I do with the compliance end of the continuum. And I think about how that impacts, from a well-being, your mental and emotional state.
Yeah, there's definitely value to staying in touch with your own why behind something. I'm sure that most people don't, like, have this intrinsic, innate motivation to brush their teeth. They're not just like, oh, this is such a pleasurable experience, I can't wait to do it. But you do it, and it doesn't necessarily always feel like compliance, like your mom standing there being like, you will brush your teeth, young lady. We're doing it of our own free volition typically, but that's because we're connected to some kind of why that matters to us. Like, no, this isn't pleasurable in the moment. I don't want this, but I do want what this gets me, which is this larger why. And I want that because I want to be healthy and well. I don't want to have, disease in my mouth, like whatever simplistic ways we can think about it. Right. But sometimes, once you can get in touch with the why, you do realize that some of the things that you're doing are not for something that feels free and related to yourself. It might be like, oh, I'm doing this certain kind of like body movement and certain kind of nutritional intake. And it's because I want to have a body that's shaped a certain way, but that's not even my own why. That might be a societally constructed demand, like, oh, you have to look like this or you're going to get XYZ. And so is that actually my own volition? Is that actually my freedom? I might be freely choosing it, but it's not actually my own why that I can own internally. I'm kind of acceding to something. And so, yeah, I think having a sense of your own why, and, that can relate to many people here who have career transitions or other big life transitions. My own experience of burnout and depression, like I had a why behind what I was doing that felt like it was very intrinsic. But at some point it also got mixed up with a lot of like a sense of, this is what I have to do in order to be a good person, in order to be able to tell myself that I succeeded. Like this is my picture of success. And so I'll know that if I'm a good person and a successful person, if I achieve it, right? And so, yes, there is some volition and freedom behind that. And then also it at some point can become a drill sergeant. At some point it can become, you become your own bully. So yeah, I think
yes, and you get stuck on the chase, right? Yeah. I mean, if it's always out in front of you, right, and you're always chasing it, you never get to experience it in the moment and say, no, I am success. Versus I will be successful when, oh, well, to be successful, I can't stop there. I got to do the next one. And then I got to do the next one. And that's a lot of what you were talking about around how the music industry can really chew people up, right? It's all that's, and I just wrote about this in my blog this week, this intersection of productivity and creativity. To me, there's such space for friction there that really feels self-limiting.
Yeah. I mean, the productivity question is always so interesting because there's, we tend in our society, we're kind of like conditioned to think of it in a certain way. Like productivity is when you are doing something that makes money for yourself or for somebody else, right? Like that's kind of, we've really reduced it versus like the productivity of like gardening, or how productive it is to nurture a relationship, or how productive it is to, produce some kind of sense of like learning or interest or curiosity in yourself or in a loved one. There's lots of different versions of being productive, but we tend to think that some of those are really important, which conveniently for the people who make money off of us tend to be the money things. And we tend to think that the forms of productivity, the other forms of productivity are quote unquote, just leisure, just indulgences, just a hobby or something like that. But those things are often connected to that internal why, that internal sense of, however we might describe well-being. And, our creativity can definitely be limited by our sense of, obligation and what I'm supposed to be productive. Okay, productive in what exact way, and who benefits from your definition of productivity and of which kind of productivity matters. It's not often yourself. Somebody's benefiting. It might not be you.
Yeah. And if it's not, but what a great question to ask yourself, how am I benefiting? And if you can't answer the how am I benefiting from the hamster wheel of productivity I'm on, that's a great place to say, oh, maybe it's time to examine whether or not I'm on the right hamster wheel, because it should never be at the sacrifice of self. Right?
Yeah.
There should be some room for intersection of both at best,
Yeah. And there's a lot of work that we can do collectively on our systems and our structures and shared resources and collective, mutual aid and these kinds of things that we can do to help make that more and more possible for people, because sometimes people are making that sacrifice. This would have been true for me as well, making a certain kind of sacrifice toward a certain kind of job or career or personal ambition or construction of the self, because that's what they think they have to do to literally survive. Like, oh, if I'm not doing that, I don't have any job. Maybe they can't imagine themselves in a different career, and they can't give themselves space to figure out what else to do, because who's going to pay their bills during that time? Like, we really live in a system that that requires us to sort of slot ourselves into a treadmill, get on the machine, and then keep going. And if you ever get off or need to get off, who knows what's going to happen, right? So we're kind of like, we keep going out of a sense of fear, and sometimes that fear is rooted in our ego. And then I think equally often it's rooted in our understanding, our kind of like rational understanding of survival needs. And we could really benefit from reimagining the kinds of systems that we have, and how, even if you're just looking at the bottom line economically, how we suffer by forcing people into really unhealthy situations with no escape route, because there's no other option for them if they need a break, if they need to let go, if they need to retreat for a moment,
Well, let's lean into this a minute, because I think this is a great place to end our time together with everyone. We've sort of heard the origin story that got you to where you are now, but you research, you write, you bring thought leadership in these spaces. This has become the body of work that you are building and bringing into the world. And I love what you said about, you don't have to hit rock bottom. You don't have to wait until you become that puddle on the floor. So for people who are maybe caught in their one story, that are caught in their resistance of reimagining the next evolution or revolution of where they are, what guidance would you give them to help them really to start to uncover those internal stories and give themselves permission to start to imagine something new?
There's a few things that come to mind. I wrote in Psychology Today about something I call the art of refusal, which is basically the idea that all creativity is rooted in refusal. And that's refusal, like a refusal to believe that everything that can exist is already here, or that I don't have the power or the right, or, whatever, to contribute something to change the world. James Baldwin said, "The world is before you, and you need not take it or leave it as it was when you came in." And he didn't say that from a point of like optimism. He said it as just like, that's real. That's the truth. Like, none of us needs to take or leave the world as it was when we came in. But in order to be able to make something new, you have to refuse how things currently are. And so the point of the article, though, and we'll make sure that it's linked on that page that everybody has access to, but the point of the article is that the feelings of refusal are often really difficult. It's not just when you get mad or you get passionate and you're like, I'm going to do something different. Like, that can feel pretty good in some ways. But a lot of times the feelings of refusal are grief and rage and really awful, catastrophe in many cases. It is often a response to a crisis. And we are often kind of conditioned to see those really difficult feelings as just things to get over, or they're kind of obstacles to our future. And the truth is that if we can recognize those emotions as emotions of refusal, what am I refusing? And what does that tell me about what kind of future I actively want? I am refusing to keep putting my body through something that it can no longer handle. That must mean that someplace in me, I want a situation where I can live in more like alignment and health and just like even pleasure and beauty in the world. That's a really simplistic sort of like physical manifestation of this idea of the art of refusal. But, the things that we are grieving, the things that we're raging over tell us a lot about what we value. And nothing is ever created without a sense of refusal. So that's the first thing that I would say, is that if you are in the midst of really difficult emotions, and this also works organizationally with like organizational leadership and organizational change and workplace culture and things like that. But if you're in the experience of something incredibly difficult, can we recognize that as refusal and move towards something else? And the second thing that I would say just really quickly is that if you have no idea what other story could be told or where else you can go, if I refuse this, there's nothing else. If that's the sense that you have, remember that there's a difference between not knowing how to do something and believing that that thing is literally impossible. somebody knows, somebody has been an example of moving from one situation to something completely different. And there is a path. You not knowing it is a problem, and it can be scary, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Oh, I think that is so important, especially when you couple that with what you said earlier about checking in with yourself and just saying, what is it about what has been that I want to carry forward from here? Once you get in touch with that and you know what that is, that can be that touchstone that you need of comfort as you walk forward into the unknown. But you're showing this wonderful and beautiful example. Thank you for sharing your story of what becomes possible when we trust and we give ourselves permission. And it was work, friends. We're not saying that this isn't necessarily an easy path. I hope you got that from what Dr. Golden shared with us. Tasha did the hard work along the way. You put yourself in therapy. You brought mentors around you. You used a lot of resources. You found and used resources around you. Thank you, Christy. Glad you're here with us, Gary. Felipe, I saw you earlier. Happy to have that feedback. Thank you so much. But yes, there is work. This is work, but it's the right, Glennon Doyle says this on her podcast all the time about it being the right kind of hard. And I think what Tasha is teaching us today is a little bit about how to understand and figure out what the right kind of hard is. Because when you hit these moments, you will have to work your way through the hard. The hard is there. It's right in front of you, but you want to make sure that you are choosing that right kind of hard. Tasha, any final words of wisdom you want to share? This has been it's everything I wanted this conversation to be. And if you ever see her listed to keynote, or if you plan conferences and you need a keynote, you do not want to miss seeing her on stage, giving you even more of the details, the research that underpins all of this. It's extraordinary. But any final thoughts to share?
Thank you, Rita. Yeah, I would, I'm glad that you mentioned that I tapped into resources when I need them, and I still do that. And that is a big privilege. And a lot of my work, my training is in public health and systems thinking. And to whatever extent any of us individuals can reimagine our lives and tell a completely different story, I always want to remind people that we can do that as a collective as well. And in fact, we must, that we can reimagine how our systems work, how our resources work, so that we can make sure that everybody has access to these kinds of resources, even if that resource is a friend. Some people don't have a friend, right? Like a mentor. These are things that were free to me at the time, but I knew the people, right? And if you're feeling like, it would be a privilege to have access to that, you are right. And as a collective, we can and must reimagine our systems and do the work necessary to ensure that we are helping one another collectively to take the paths that we need to take to be well.
I love that. And I think you are speaking to the right people. That this audience is definitely an audience that is about self, but is also about building a better world around us. And it's why I appreciate so many of the guests and the friends of the show. So Dr. Golden, thank you so very much. Please, Dr. Let's put it back up here one more time for everybody. It's not doctor, it's just TashaGolden.com. And then she has a special show page for us. And this will be linked in the notes, TSITM, for the story I'm telling myself. And she said she would link some articles and stuff. You need to connect with her. You need to follow her. You need to know when she's dropping those new articles in Psychology Today. There's so much good stuff there. Come back again next week. The great guests just keep coming, and we will see you back here again on Tuesday. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Tasha. And
thank you so much.
That you have a wonderful afternoon. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you love this episode, leave us those 5 stars and be sure to share this with a friend. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. See you back here next week.